Welcome back to another episode of Liberty and Morality Defined presents Bread and Circuses. There are a lot of things that we can discuss. Today just so happens to be that bread and circuses mantra so many people like to talk about or invoke. Those in favor of government existence, the party politic advocates for getting involved in the system to change the system, invoke this idea just as frequently as do dissenters of government. And would you like to know a little truth neither group is going to like? Both of them are often wasting their time and hurting their causes by destroying their credibility. Well, what do I mean by this? Simply put, it's all about understanding what the idea of bread and circuses is all about. For starters, this idea came from Rome. In Rome's final years on the road to collapse, pun intended, I suppose, its leadership invoked a series of games paid for exclusively by taxes. The games were designed to distract the crowds from what was going on politically. Essentially, it was a bribe to garner favor from those of the citizenry whom were at risk for dissenting. This was also employed as a means partially to help curb some of the failures of immigrants brought in to assimilate. This tactic worked more or less for a while until the Roman population was all but overrun by other cultures brought in to fill the city and surrounding area because local populations just weren't enough anymore to sustain the overreaching arms and economic limits to maintain that empire. They were, of course, scattered around the world at the time, controlling with less success each day the territories they had previously conquered. If you understand just a little bit about how important communication is, then about 7 days by horseback is close to the limit of control, where at 100% is still remotely possible. And this influx of bodies, less and less assimilated, was partly the cause for collapse, because they needed more and more wealth faster and faster to keep up pretenses. Thus, clipping of coins and creation of fiat currencies in addition to other issues were also part of the problem. All of these things, immigration by invitation, monetary manipulation, conquest, economic regulation, and excessive government-funded programs, so were all the main ingredients for causing Rome's collapse. Now, you can make parallels with the United States, but that is not what I'm interested in discussing in this work presently. I only want to discuss the issue of bread and circuses. I wish to focus on this primarily as it seems to have taken a turn for the worse concerning outright hating people and causing them intentional grief because they enjoy a particular activity that is not meant to be harmful to the hater or aggressor invoking the bread and circuses mantra. So now that we know what the bread and circuses mantra is based upon, it's important to note that they are exclusively tax-funded ventures. That immediately separates the overwhelming majority of sports events in the United States and other Western societies. Sports events presently are often some combination of tax-funded and private enterprise ventures. They are done in part not to intentionally distract the citizenry where these teams play, but to bring in revenue to the local businesses. Just look at local town hall meetings. Well, where I reside at the time this is being created, just outside of Cincinnati, Ohio, the town hall meetings and local news broadcasts frequently discuss how renovations to local stadiums will bring in tourists and their money. These ventures are often partially tax-funded or allowed to happen because of rezoning laws and the potential tax income they may bring based on local regulations. The goal is noble for sure. The goal for all government is noble in intent, in so much as it's designed to protect. And the protection, while often arbitrary and subjective in nature, is the goal of all government. For Western societies, it is about the protection and well-being of the general populace, and that makes the promotion and creation of these stadiums about the local Cincinnati citizenry's economic well-being. It is meant to attract visitors, new residents, and their money, of course. Taking a small step back from this, it is seemingly about tricking people to spend their money in the Cincinnati area instead of another area. And yes, that is entirely what it is about. However, this is connected to a much larger picture of unintended consequences of taxation's noble intent, and I'll discuss that at another time. For now, though, yes, it can be seen as a distraction, but it is not the distraction. It is just a tactic by local governing leadership to assert its wisdom, or to promote what wisdom it does have, while ensuring they are to remain in power by their noble and good deeds, seen exclusively. This isn't even meant for the average individual to consider the achieved goals while hiding the means that taxation is in reality theft, making those goals tainted and philosophically inconsistent. It is merely a symptom of the local populace accepting government as legitimate. Basically, they choose to participate in the electoral process, the people do, and they get other people into office to vote yes on these ventures that will create some jobs for taxation to help out the locals instead of going out and creating what's necessary to encourage jobs in the first place. Understanding economics, we know that governments don't create jobs, but in their limited defense, such a task is often greatly hindered because of government regulations anyway. So it is merely playing by the rules, which is easier than not, and getting handcuffed and sent to jail. Digging deep enough into this entirely about people being nescient without real clarity and knowledge concerning economics, that's what the issue is. So for those, if these people truly understood economics while promoting these ideas of government existence, they would be evil and vile at that point if they understood. But I argue they have noble intentions, but they just lack the wisdom to understand the consequences. The people who promote government typically, and the average voter and the average politician, are nescient, and I will have no problem arguing that's the overwhelming majority of people supporting government and participating in it. It's not not every family or everybody involved in politics is a Clinton or a Bush or a Rothschild. Now, therefore, in order for the sports teams to be full distractions and something to frown upon fairly, they need to be fully induced by politics. Any real distraction needs to be fully induced and taken care of or provided by through political means and taxation. And what people celebrate on television in the United States and the stadiums that they attend in person alike generally are not. But military recruitment centers are, public schools are, voting is, roads are, regulations are, law and order is, trials are, the constitutions of the states and the federal government are distractions. These are the real distractions. Why is it important to make this distinction between government paid and privately funded? In short, because all government is doing is taking things we already do and fund them for some of us at the expense of all of us, or some of us, sometimes just some of us, for some of us, in order to gain political favor among some of the citizenry. This favor translates into division among us, and the seeds of infighting are sown among those who do not fully understand how to think critically, if at all. Of course, I believe it is important to point out that the other noble intent of government was not to be divisive, okay, but consolatory for protection and safety against other more violent societies and nature which cannot be controlled. Now, this isn't the purpose of government, to divide people, that is, but it is the effect of government, evolved and grown in strength and illegitimate authority based on acts of unwarranted aggression. Once again, the noble intent of government is to protect people from foreign invaders first, and second, to provide legal systems, just legal systems, although the latter is questionable, which leads to a few realizing the potential to profit from transactions of taking from many just a little and having to provide only lip service of a product to them in return. And they hide their motives behind the reasoning of democratic bureaucracy, that is. But by the time they've profited, their tenure in office is complete, and they need not try any further if they are smart to avoid detection. Then there are those like the Clintons and Bushes. Years and years they stay in power, profiting off the system directly and indirectly. And they create scandals and legislations that takes years to sort out, and before we know it, they are fantastically wealthy because we were too busy being distracted by the distractions used to stop us from realizing that their insistence that we play by the rules that make them rich are the distractions. But what are the distractions from? Okay, here we go. Long story short, the issue is consent to being governed at all. That is and will forever be the issue. A lot of people would like to suggest when this issue is raised that it is a social contract. And they'll fight you tooth and nail on this. But make no mistake, the issue is consent. Not sports teams, not what a politician did or didn't do, not what a celebrity did or didn't do, not who won a game or lost a game, not who covered their heart during a national anthem, or whoever prayed on a football field, or plays Pokemon Go, or who's running for political office, or online video games. Those are not the distractions. What we made for dinner last night and shared all over social media, things like that should be celebrated, not shamed. What we made for dinner should be celebrated because we who made that possible did so peacefully. There is no shame in sharing what you created or made possible through peaceful and voluntary interactions. There should never be shame in that. Play your online video games like Star Wars The Old Republic, World of Warcraft, Lord of the Rings Online, and let people who ridicule them as making you stupid eat dirt, because they don't understand their own philosophies well enough to clearly distinguish between real distractions and those hijacked by a few and made into tools for profit. So, just because government controls how some programming will be implemented on television doesn't mean that television is the problem or video games being regulated are the problem. It definitely doesn't mean that because government gets involved in the building of a stadium that sports teams are the distraction. And this is where so many dissenters of government get it wrong. Advocates of government proclaim not voting is the problem while cheering on their sports teams. But those dissenters of government often ridicule with such hostility those advocates of government for being what they call sheeple, cheering on their favorite sports teams. These distractions are divisions between people that are hostile. That's what the distractions are. Being hostile and creating hostility where there doesn't need to be hostility. Well, just as where the advocate of government is creating hostility by asking somebody else to do something for them, to point a gun at somebody else where they're not willing to, that's creating unnecessary hostility. Just like ridiculing somebody for liking a sports team is creating hostility there because the sports team isn't the problem. It's the government getting involved in it and taking over that. And the individual ridiculing the sports team and the liking of sports is the problem because they're making an issue out of something that doesn't need to be an issue. Yet if these advocates of government bought the tickets, paid for the programming, and worked in part for what they celebrate, then leave their sports teams alone. Such things bring them joy, and it is human nature to want to compete anyway. There is nothing wrong with that. At least it's done in a peaceful way, on a football field, or soccer field, or baseball field, or wherever, instead of on a battlefield, shooting people with guns to kill them. Instead, ask how they could better their teams, or better their sports, or better whatever it is they like if government wasn't involved. Ask them how much more frequent their grand dinner could be, or how much better it might be if the government wasn't hindering them. Ask them what's important to them and how it could be improved upon if government wasn't in the way. But don't shame people for enjoying what is generally peaceful, but for government deciding to intervene into it in order to take credit and manipulate it or otherwise control it for their own profit and power increases. What people enjoy in life that is entertaining is not the distraction anymore. They are hijacked ideas used to influence them into participating in something that would not exist if not induced by fear of invaders or fear of the gun employed to coerce compliance with paying taxes or initiating that hostile interaction. The real bread and circuses are working within the system to effect a change, regardless of it being positive or negative. The distraction is in obeying the gunman or government who robs your business or home and demands you fill out paperwork to show how much you owed to prevent them from robbing you twice, so they can ensure they robbed your neighbor equally along with you. The distraction is taking welfare or aid from the government or the robber instead of kicking them out. Taking such aid only encourages them to continue hurting others while profiting themselves for providing no legitimate involuntary service. And before it's considered, there is no peaceful way to bankrupt a government that can simply print and borrow more. To take welfare from the system while the populace is still growing only helps to soften the blows of accepting more welfare to hasten the collapse. If you understand basic economics, then it will be clear what the issue is. In short, if there are $100 and 100 people, increasing the population by one person or $1 changes the value of those dollars. Thus, increasing the population, which sees how others are taking welfare without understanding the purpose, is to collapse the system, only prolongs it. But again, this is for another discussion about the unintended consequences of taxation. So writing letters to your congressman or government representative is a distraction. However, voting is a distraction that is the most harmful, since it silences your actual voice in the form of a check mark or a kin on paper or electronic note that will never be read aloud by another voice, again, with your passion and experiences. And even if you do consent to such a system, how long before the system does to you what you don't consent to? Every 4 years, 2 years, or more? When? The distractions are the ways governments get you to not talk about why it is necessary for it to exist at all. The distractions are the means in which government directly silences you in the moment, so it can have another moment to itself to continue working, regardless of its purpose. Once more, let me offer a little more clarity. The goal of government is supposed to be noble in its roots to protect. The problem is not the whole of government existence and participation. The problem is not even the minor intentional manipulation of government existence by a few like the Clintons or Bushes to profit enormously from. The problem is in the means in which the noble ends are achieved. That is always the problem. Government is the distraction from understanding the problem. If the goal is to protect, then the means must reflect that. A gun pointed at someone not responsible for unwarranted acts of aggression simply because others think he or she should pay for something they want or need is not just. And that contradicts the goal of protection. The linguistic ninjas will ultimately suggest that the goal is protection from foreign invaders. Of course, to that I'll say, then a new goal should be created, as the protection is no longer required exclusively from foreign invaders, but now also domestic terrorists. The goal should be universally applicable, and no cherry-picking favorites or groups over others should be allowed to maintain philosophical and moral consistency. However, that would require fully defining one's philosophical and moral parameters. And how many people have done that in the world? Certainly not even a majority, as the overwhelming present majority seems to abide by something they didn't create, but were taught. It doesn't matter that such terrorists, law enforcers, or whatever you would like to call them, redistribute a portion of the wealth they collect back to those they coerce. The roads can be built and their designated places agreed upon by those who use them. The distractions are what government does directly to keep people divided on the symptoms which come with its existence. And those symptoms are economic restrictions and travel restrictions. The distractions are all the emotionally hyped up solutions to get things done now, which distract from the means of achieving them. The focal points are the goals and the methods to accomplishing them. The distractions are all of the things that are not voluntary in nature and do not or are not done so with a clear path of thought progression. Let me rephrase that last bit. The focal points are the promotion of transparent philosophies which are universally applicable to all in order to ensure peace of mind, so people will create infinite amounts of wealth instead of engage in coercive means which deter and often completely halt such creation. The distractions are all of the things that promote this but do not show their philosophical work to achieve this. For now, I'd like to thank you for your time. If you found this helpful, please like, share, and give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to encourage more content like this, please visit my website, jimlimberdavis.com, to explore more of my works, download free copies of my ebooks Liberty and Morality Defined, which I base all of my content on, and consider donating even just $1 to encourage even more work like this. Thank you so much for taking a peacefully proactive solution and bettering humanity's plight through comprehension and creation instead of ridicule and destruction.